And this is our last of our Paramedic Psychomotor Exam and Scenario, the competency, the portfolio webinars for the year. So we'll go through and do the presentation, and then we will open it up for questions afterwards and see if I can answer some of your questions for you. So what we're going to go over today is some of the reasons why the National Registry is changing its psychomotor exam, what the components of a portfolio are, what we've done in the past years and in upcoming years to promote this process to our stakeholders. I'm going to talk a little bit about the regional scenario development workshops that we'll be hosting next year in 2016, and then the final thing is we'll talk about the timeline for implementation. So why do we need to change? Why are we moving from our 12 skill that we've had for all these years and now going to a scenario-based exam? Well, one of the big things that, 12 skills, we're just looking at your ability to perform discrete skills one day at one given moment, versus going with the scenario where you need to take all of those skills, you need to integrate that into a simulated patient in a simulated environment and be able to take just those skills and put them all together and manage a patient. So that was one of the things that we identified. More of, we need to test like we practice. And with a certification exam, that's what we want to make sure we're doing. We want to make sure that those that we certify are competent to practice. So that's why we identified this need to start moving towards a scenario-based exam. Now, we're not going to get, it's a big change for the EMS community, so we're not going to get there all at once. And we're going to be doing it in phases. But in order to do this, we needed to have some backup information on what the candidates and their abilities are. So that is why we moved into a portfolio. So when we're doing the 12 discrete skills, if you look at Bloom's, we're looking at the lower level, recall and understanding. They're able to walk into a room and just essentially regurgitate, just repeat what they've been trained to do. We're not really asking them to do the higher level. We're not asking them to make judgment or put things together and come up and synthesize a treatment plan. It's very cut and dry what you're going to do when you walk into each of those individual 12 skills for the most part. Now we're looking to really start using their higher level of skills to when we're testing on these exams. So so in order to do this, we needed to have a portfolio, because we're going from 12 individual skills that we assess to, at the end game there'll be 4 scenarios somewhere down the road. We're not there yet. Phase 1, we're just going to use 1 scenario, but at the end of the game, the end game is to have testing candidates over 4 unique scenarios. So in order to do that, we needed to have a portfolio that shows the competency of the candidates while they're students. So the students have developing competencies. When they initially start off, they're not very competent. They have to keep trying and trying and trying. But as they practice, they become more competent. They develop that competency in both their skills and in their scenarios. So we need a record of that, though. So we need some way to track that. So we are requiring, after August 1st of 2016, that all new students that are enrolled in paramedic programs, they have a portfolio. And this portfolio can be an electronic, like the picture on the left, where you're using an electronic commercial, or you developed your own process where electronically you capture information about the candidates and how they did on certain skills and scenarios, or you can be old school, you can do it paper and pencil, and you can have a binder for each student where you have captured all of their skill sheets and all of their scenario evaluation sheets, all of their clinical sheets, and all of their field externships sheets, and you've captured all that data in a hard copy. And any combination between, if you want to have them do it on paper first and then transfer it electronically, if you want to have them do it on paper and then you scan that into PDFs and you use an Excel document to track them. It doesn't matter the format that you use. At the end of the day, though, all we're looking for is that you have documented evidence of how the students performed throughout their education, and that you can provide that evidence if someone were to come to audit you. So if National Registry was to come in and look at your records for the students for their portfolio, a year down the line, or 6 months, you'd be able to pull up a file. Either you go to pick up a hard copy of something, or you provide us with an electronic copy. We're just looking for that you have a method to document the students' competency throughout their training. So, this is an example of a skills where they're using, you're either using, again, electronic, where you're tracking them and they have goals they have to meet, and you're tracking that throughout their education, throughout their scenario lab, or that you can also have a skills packet, and you can be tracking it that way in paper and pencil. And if you want to transfer it back to an electronic, if not, it's whatever works for your program to track the 33 skills that we identify in our portfolio manual and the 15 scenario topic areas to track their performance in there. And we just need to have a record at the end of the day that we can reproduce if needed. So when we're looking at this portfolio, we're looking to capture the three phases of their formative and summative phases of their psychomotor education. So there's the laboratory phase where they're doing the skills and the scenarios. There's the clinical phase where they're going out to the hospitals, the freestanding emergency centers, the clinics, wherever you have arranged for them to get clinical experience. And then the final phase is the field phase. Now, in this example, we show overlap between the three phases. You don't have to have overlap in your program. If your program, each one of these phases is a distinct phase, and you have to entirely finish one phase before you move on to the next, that is fine. We don't dictate how that has to be constructed. It's just you need to make it so what works for you and what works for your program. Now, you see in the laboratory and the clinical phases that the student is acting as the team member. And once they have all their classroom and their laboratory and clinical education done, now they are what's identified as the capstone field internship, and they're truly the team leader. They've got all of the pieces that they need to go out and lead a team call. And that is when we're looking for our team leader evaluations in the capstone field internship. Now, this definition of what capstone is closely mirrors what COA has identified as their capstone field internship. When we developed the portfolio and the scenario exams, this whole process, we've been involving COA and other stakeholders throughout the EMS community, but we paid specific attention to COA because we want to make sure that our requirements and their requirements are the same thing, so we don't cause undue work for programs where you're doing one thing for the National Registry requirement and another thing for a COA requirement. We want to make sure that the requirements are the same for both organizations so that it frees up, it doesn't create unnecessary work for the program directors and for tracking of this these skills. Now, you can see too that there is a field experience in EMS unit. If your program allows it, your students can do time in the field before they have completed their laboratory, clinical, and didactic education, but just know that that's not going to count towards their capstone field internship. But you can use those as team member evaluations for your students. And also another thing too is to remember that when we do a skill, we need to be able to document that we're competent, the student's competent in the skill. Once they've documented that competency in that individual skill, as soon as possible, if you can move it into a scenario, we found with our pilot programs that those students, they do better because now they start to imprint that more, and they really start, not only is it just a skill that I'm, say practicing an IV on the plastic hand, now I'm taking that IV skill and I'm incorporating it into a scenario, and I'm better able to do that in a real life situation. So the sooner that you can take a skill, move it into a formative scenario where they're practicing it in the scenario and they're starting to reinforce that not only in context, really. We're starting to use our skills in context. The students, number one, they like it better, and number two, they achieve mastery of that skill a little bit faster than they would if it's just they're doing individual skills and then I'm all done with all my skills. Now I'm going to go to the lab and do scenarios. As soon as you can incorporate a skill into a scenario, the better off your students are. And also, if you're doing overlap, once your students have done their skills and they've shown that they can do a skill in a scenario, and you signed off on them in that, then it's okay to go ahead and move them to the clinical phase. I wouldn't want to take a student who hasn't demonstrated competency on the IV skills in a scenario and dump them in the IV rotation in the hospital. I want to make sure that, number one, they've demonstrated it on a mannequin, possibly they've demonstrated it on a classmate, but definitely they've demonstrated in a scenario that they know how to start an IV in context before I'm going to put them in the hospital rotation just starting IVs. I want these people to be well along the way to mastery and becoming competent with these skills before I turn them loose on real patients in a hospital setting or in a clinical setting. So the 33 skills. If you look in our portfolio manual, and you look in Appendix C, there are the 33 skills that we ask that all students have in their portfolio. Now, there's many programs that have more than those 33 skills. And if your students are doing more than those 33 skills, good. You don't have to just do our 33 skills. We're looking for documentation that at a minimum, you've done the 33 skills that we asked for. If your program wants to go above and beyond that, more power to you, and would encourage that you keep doing that. I mean, this is what your community of interest has shown you. You've discussed this with your community of interest. You've discussed this with your medical director, and this is what your area needs. So by all means, you want to keep doing that. But you do need to make sure that the 33 skills that are outlined in Appendix C are included in your portfolio for your students. Now, we have in Appendix C, we've also included an evaluation form. This is a best practice evaluation form that we've worked with stakeholders from around the country to develop. You do not have to use this evaluation form if you do not want to. If you have a form that works better for you, then by all means, keep using that form. We're not looking to say that, oh, hey, you have to use our forms. You don't have to. You can use whatever works for you, just as long as you're capturing data on their competency in at least these 33 skills. We have them available on paper you just print off the PDF for the manual, and you can just copy them from there. There are also the two major vendors that we're aware of, FISDAP and Platinum, both have them available in electronic format. I've spoken to many programs that have done similar forms that they've designed themselves. We're working on fillable forms. As soon as we get those, we need to finalize them. As soon as those are finalized, we'll have actually a fillable PDF of these forms available on our website. So, but again, it's whatever works for your program, and just to make sure you document those 33 skills at a minimum. Now, there's also 15 scenario topic areas. that you need to make sure that you cover, and that with covering them, you need to we have evaluation forms for that also. And again, the same thing. If you would have a form that you have designed to capture your student's competency in a scenario topic area, by all means use that. If not, go ahead and use our best practice document that we have developed. But again, here, the important thing here is you're tracking the different topic areas that they cover. You're also tracking the different patient types. So if you look at Appendix A in the portfolio manual, at the end of the day, when the portfolio is complete, we're going to look to make sure that each one of the students has had 20 successful team leads. 10 of those team leads need to be as a team lead, 20 successful evaluations, I'm sorry. 10 of them need to be as a team leader, and they need to be over adult patient leads, 4 of them over adult patient leads, 3 over pediatric patient leads, 3 over geriatric patient leads, and then the other 10 need to be successful team member evaluations. And that can be over any of the 15 scenario topic areas. And the different topic areas are respiratory distress and failure, chest pain, the cardiac, stroke, overdose, abdominal pain, allergic reaction and anaphylaxis, diabetic emergencies, psychiatric conditions, seizures, OBGYN, blunt trauma, penetrating trauma, burns, or hemorrhage. So at the end of the day, I'm going to have 20, at a minimum, 20 successful evaluations. 10 of them are on team lead, 10 of them are team members. So you don't have to have for each of the 15 categories, you don't have to have 10. It's just overall, over all those 15 scenario topic areas, you have to have an overall of 10 team leaders and 10 team members. And then we move on to the clinical phase. Again, this is where we're taking our skills that we learned in the skills lab, we practiced in the scenario lab, we've shown that we're proficient in both the skill and the scenario lab. Now we're going to take those skills and we're going to move them out into the clinical setting, where we're going to practice them in a supervised environment on actual patients. The documentation of this, we have a best practice sheet. It's a 2-page sheet for each patient contact. And initially, when we had designed this, we had designed some 6 real brief evaluation forms that were more specific for 6 individualized skills. And what we found working with our stakeholders was that in busy ERs and busy clinical settings, we couldn't get those filled out, and there was not really the evaluations weren't really being done right. So we actually opted to eliminate them. So we just have a 1-page document that, well, it's a 2-page, I'm sorry, front and back, where you need to have the preceptor fills that out at the end of the day, and for each patient contact, and you track each patient contact on that. That way we're making sure that what we're getting is good data and it's not being fudged a little bit, possibly. So we want to make sure that's not happening. And then finally is the capstone field internship. This is where the candidates go out into the field. They are the team leader. They have all the pieces of the puzzle to do patient care. And of course, they are supervised by a clinician who is at least a paramedic, who is truly in charge of the call in case something happens. But the team leader should be running the call, and only the preceptor should only be stepping in if there's a patient safety or crew safety issue and addressing those. So the student should actually be running the call at this point, and this is where we're doing our evaluation. And this is where, with this, we require that during the capstone field internship, that the students must have 18 of their last 20 evaluations, whether ALS or BLS, they need to be successful on their team lead. So if I've I'm on my 25th evaluation, and I've only got 17 they're good. I'm on a streak of 17 where I've been successful. On my 25th, I'm unsuccessful, and now go to my 26th, and I don't have. As long as I can have a block of 20, we keep moving that block of 20 down their path of all their team leads that they've had. As long as I can put 18 of 20 in that block that they're successful as a team leader, then they can, that constitutes a successful completion of that capstone field internship, that requirement that they have the 18 of the last 20 successful team leads. And while all those calls may not be ALS calls, the likelihood of having 20 ALS calls in a row is kind of low. It needs to, the patient contact needs to take place on an ALS unit that's responsible for responding to critical and emergent patients. So someone that's a unit that's taking 911 calls. That's where we're looking. We're not looking to put this, in someone that's doing standbys or something like that. That really doesn't count as patient contact. We want someone that's responding to 911 calls or something similar to that. So again, this portfolio now provides us with this massive evidence that shows that your students, from the beginning of their clinical education throughout so the beginning of their psychomotor education, when you started them out in the skills lab, all the way through their end of their field internship, they've demonstrated this and built this competency, and they've become more and more successful in these skills. So I have this massive of evidence over time that has shown that the student is able to do these 33 individual skills. So that's that massive evidence that portfolio provides is what allows us to move now towards this scenario-based exam that we're testing, that's more realistic, that we're doing things in real life, how patients are really treated on the field. So we've worked really hard to promote this over the years. We've been presenting since 2009 at the national shows and making sure that we get this information out through our newsletter and through other conferences that we attend. We do presentations. So we've been working diligently to get this information out to as many people as possible of our stakeholders. We've developed the skill lab check sheets with and again, when we developed these things, it wasn't just a bunch of people in Columbus sitting around a table developing this. We're involving stakeholders from around the country. There's very few states that aren't involved that don't have someone that has been involved in the development of this portfolio and scenario exam process. We move this out to as many people as possible so that we get as much input. And again, this has been an evolving process. What we started with in 2009 is not what we're looking to implement in 2017. There's been changes along the way, and those changes have come about from information that the people that have been piloting this have brought back to us. We are by no means the experts. We've been working with you folks and the folks that have helped us. We're all the experts, and we're learning this all together. And we're taking this information and we're developing best practices so that when we do evaluate candidates, we're doing it in the best way possible. So with the help of our stakeholders, we did develop the skill sheets and the scenario sheets. Early this year, we released the portfolio manual, and that again was done in conjunction with our stakeholders that have been involved with this. And we've been doing webinars, and we've actually mailed all those the portfolio manuals. We mailed them to all of the program directors that COA gave us from their database. And we followed those up with phone calls to see if people had questions about that. And those that had questions about that, we've addressed their questions, and we're working towards making sure they understand what's going on. We want the community to know what's happening. So when this goes live, January 1 of 17, everyone has an understanding and has had an opportunity to understand how this process is going to affect their students and to ask questions of us about how it's going to affect their students. So Starting next year, we're going to be doing 20 regional scenario development workshops. These are the locations that we identified. We looked at COA's data again of where the paramedic programs were located in the United States. And there are areas where there are not a lot of paramedic programs. And unfortunately, we have a limited resource on time and ability to get to areas. So we tried to choose the concentrations of the paramedic programs for our first round of doing these scenario workshops in 16. So these were the areas we targeted. We're also, in these regional development workshops, what we're going to do is, it's not going to be you just come and you sit and you listen and we're going to talk to you and tell you about how to do scenarios and how to make scenarios. No. To attend, you're going to have a homework assignment. You're going to need to watch videos ahead of time. You're going to need to develop a scenario based on the scenario template that is found in the portfolio manual. You're going to send that in ahead of time. We're going to select scenarios from those submitted, and we're going to break. So not only are you going to sit in the lecture and you're going to learn about what we found and what our stakeholders have found helpful in developing informative and summative scenarios, but we're also going to take, after we learn about it in a large group, we're going to break you up into small groups, and in these small groups, you're going to take a scenario that was submitted by one of the other people attending, and you're going to modify it based on what you learned in the lecture. And then after you've modified it, you're actually going to have a paramedic student come in, and with your assistance and the people in your group's assistance, you're going to run the scenario, and you're going to see what worked, what didn't work. And it's amazing watching these scenarios where educators, think that, hey, this is a great scenario, it works fine. We wrote it and we understood what we wanted, and then it plays out, and what they thought was going to happen didn't happen, or they weren't clear in their instructions. And so by practicing these, you find out what do we need to change, and then you'll revise it again, and then the next day you're going to actually work, and we'll do that for formative. So you're going to, the student's going to be running through a scenario. You're going to be stopping them when they make errors. They make a critical error. You're going to stop them, have that learning moment there, and then either they're going to restart or another student will start on it. And then the following day, we're going to work on developing a summative scenario, and we're going to deliver that. And again, we'll have lectures. It's not going to be a week. We're just going to turn the group loose. We're going to actually have a facilitator in with each of these groups, working with these groups to keep them on task and to try to help them develop the scenario so that they can deliver it. And then again, we'll take that summative scenario and we'll run that through like you would in a summative evaluation of your students, or similar to like the National Registry would do with a summative evaluation, our evaluation of students for competency for certification. So we'll deliver it that way. And again, we'll see what works, what doesn't work. Groups will go back and edit it again, and then we will, we're going to take all the work product from there, and we're going to put that in an online format so that educators can go and here are some scenarios that groups have worked to tune them up, and you can use them for your programs and for your students to make sure that to help with the development of scenarios for your program. And it'll provide you a good starting point if you don't have scenarios to work on other scenarios for your students. And again, for these, the whole idea of this is we're not looking to charge anyone for this. We're going to partner with schools and with different states to find hosts where we're not going to have to charge charge educators and program directors to attend. We also are going to do pre-cons at EMS Expo and EMS World Expo, and also at NREMT's symposium. We're going to do a pre-con there. We're not sure with that, but there possibly will be a fee for that, because the the host needs to pay for the conference room space. They're working to see what they can do with that, but there may be a fee associated with those 2 conferences because they're national conferences. But the 20 that we're hosting around the country, the regional scenario development workshops, those are going to be essentially, we're not going to be charging anything for that, and the site should not be charging anything for that for participants to attend. So again, we're looking at the formative and the summative. So in the formative scenario, that's where they've just learned this skill. They're going to be making mistakes. And when they make that mistake, you want to stop them and say, oh, wait a minute, where did you put that needle? Oh, you set it on the table. Well, you can't set a needle on a table. The needle needs to go in the sharps container. So stop. That's a critical fail. We stop there, reset, start over. So we don't want to reinforce that inaccurate behavior. And we do those, and it's in the formative, they're learning. And with these evaluations, when we're evaluating these scenarios, and we're evaluating skills in the lab setting, they don't have to all be driven by the instructors. It's not all instructors that are doing these evaluation forms. We made the evaluation forms, especially for the skills, are very detailed, and they're designed for peer-to-peer evaluation. So you can put 2 students together, and they can go down the checklist. One student's doing the skill, the other student's going down the checklist and checking them off. For scenarios, you can have them work in teams, and one team is the doers. They're doing the scenario, and another team are the evaluators, and they're evaluating them as they do that scenario. They make up the evaluation team. They provide the simulated patient. They may even provide the scenario. There's programs out there that for a homework assignment is, okay, your group, you're going to write a scenario on a diabetic emergency. So you need to develop this scenario. You need to go out, and it's a group project. You work on it. So you're going to need to write everything up, how this scenario is going to unfold, and what the presentation of the patient's going to be, what the findings, what medications that they're going to take, possible allergies, and so they have to develop that. So now they're going to go home and they have to research diabetic emergencies. And the team that's going to be the ones taking the skill, now they know that, hey, tomorrow I've got an evaluation on a diabetic emergency. We better go and research that and make sure we understand what we're going to be evaluated for. So not only are the people being evaluated learning, but those who are doing the evaluation, they learn, because if they're developing a scenario and needing to provide them information, they need to study up on it also. Plus, they can learn from watching others' mistakes. But the big key is we don't want to reinforce those mistakes. So when a mistake is made in the formative scenario, you stop it, you reset, and you start over again. So we're not reinforcing those. And then in the summative phase, that's when they've gone through the formative, they've demonstrated their competency in the formative, now they're ready to move on to the summative and demonstrate it as they would in the actual field. And unless there's a patient or crew safety issue, you let the scenario run out, and what's critical is critical, and they're evaluated according to that. But you actually let it run out, and that's similar to the end of a semester or end of a module, or similar to a certification exam that we do. So our implementation timeline. So we've been going at this since 2009. And in August 1st of 2016, all candidates who are enrolled on or after that date are going to need to have a portfolio. So all your students that you enroll after this date, you're going to have a portfolio for them that tracks the 33 skills and the 15 scenario topic areas, along with the clinical and the field internship that you're already doing as a KHAB accredited or a COA LOR program. You're already tracking these things. So this is just additional with the in the laboratory phase. These are additional things you need to put into that to make a formalized portfolio. So, and then on January 1, 2017, we are going to implement phase 1 of the new scenario examination. So anyone who starts their exam after January 1 of 17, they will test on the new psychomotor exam. They will no longer be using the 12 skill after that date. So some students, if you can look up, you're looking at those dates, there's going to be students that started their program before August 1st of 16 that are going to be testing after January 1 of 17. We understand that. And those folks will be grandfathered into that portfolio requirement will be grandfathered for them, and they won't have to have it. But again, remember, 2/3 of that portfolio you're already doing as a KHAB accredited or a COA LOR program. You're already tracking those things. It's just this last piece that we're looking to track. And we had to set deadlines. So these are the deadlines that our board has endorsed. And this is just the plan to move forward. And for those folks, another thing to remember for program directors too is for scheduling exams. So typically we see a large spike in exams that are scheduled in December because people want to test at the end of that's the end of their academic cycle, and they're looking to test before the holidays. So if you have students who are in the midst of a full testing opportunity, say they tested in the beginning of December and they need to retest, they're going to need to have that retest completed by December 31st of 16, or then there's two possibilities now. If the skills they need to retest are offered on the new phase, are offered in the phase 1 exam, they'll be able to test them as they'll be able to use them as a retest. And phase 1 scenario, the phase 1 exam, we're going to be doing patient assessment trauma, dynamic cardiology, static cardiology, oral A, oral B, and then 1 out of hospital scenario. So those will be the 6 skills that they're going to take. So if they need to take one of those 5 legacy skills as a retest, and that's all they need to take as a retest, they'll be able to continue their retest opportunities until they meet all the other requirements. If it's, they still have to do it within their 2-year of course completion, and the results are still only going to be good for a year, so that still stays into play. But if the student needs to retest one of the 7 skills that is not in the new phase 1 psychomotor exam, then what we're going to do is we're going to reset their attempts, and they will go to a first full attempt. And that also goes for people that are in the midst of a retest opportunity. If they decide they want to just reset, they can reset after January 1 of 17, and they'll start with 2 full attempts. This is much like what we did in 2007 when we transitioned from the paper and pencil exam to the computer adaptive exams. If you were in the midst of your 6 full attempts, your 6 attempts at the cognitive exam, if you decided, hey, this is my 5th attempt before January 1 of 7, I'm just gonna wait, and then after January of 7, I'm gonna have another 6 full attempts at the new computer adaptive test. That was fine. So you could have been on your 5th attempt on paper, and then wait, and then automatically on January 1 they turned over and they had another 6 full attempts at the computer adaptive test. If students would like, they can do that also. They can opt into that, or they'll automatically be put into that. Anyone who's starting a full attempt after January 1 of 17, they're automatically going to have 2 full attempts at the new phase 1 psychomotor exam, and they'll just test on those 6 skills: the patient assessment trauma, dynamic cardiology, static cardiology, oral A and oral B, and then the out-of-hospital scenario. So that is the presentation that I have. Now, if you have any questions, go ahead and type them in. I am trying to work here. Let me see if I can get this a little bit bigger so I can see these a little better. And I'll try to answer your questions as we go along here. Oh my goodness. I just got to make these big enough so I can see them. So first question is, will we be sending a PowerPoint, a copy of this presentation out later? Yes, I've recorded this. This will go on our website, and we will, it'll be available on our website. So if you go to our website and you go to the front page on it, there's a section on portfolio and scenario exams. Click on that, and that will take you to our landing page for the everything that deal with portfolios and scenario exams. Okay, that's the same question asked a little bit different way. So as far as the question is regarding having students complete their field time on an ambulance that sees critical patients, we publish a standard on what services or metrics a service has to meet to be considered for this. So if you look at Appendix A, the bottom of Appendix A, students must complete 18 out of the last 20 patient contacts successfully on an ALS unit responsible for responding to critical and emergent patients who access the emergency medical system. So that is the definition that you need to follow. You have questions about what meets that in your area. Everyone should be having their advisory board meetings. Bring that to your advisory board and discuss that with your advisory board. And what meets, does this service that we want to use, does that meet this requirement? And discuss it with them and document your rationale if you're going to use or not to use a program, and then just go from there. Okay. Now that Richmond is not in West Virginia. That Richmond is in Kentucky, I believe. Sorry, Deb. Let me look here real quick. Yeah, Richmond, Kentucky, Deb, not Richmond, Virginia. And we are working for our hosts for our sites that we're conducting our regional scenario development workshops. We're working with NREMT to help us with the logistics on these. And they are, Joanne Friel, president of NREMT, she's working with us to locate sites. We've identified a good majority of the sites that we're going to be working with, but we do have a couple that we will, that we still need. So if you're looking to help out, if you could contact Joanne Friel at NREMT, would be the point of contact. You can also send me an email. If you want to send it to me at my email address, I can forward it to Joanne also, if you're looking to help out. And candidates will only have 2 attempts, yes. Much like so did I say that candidates will only have 2 attempts at the new 6-skill psychomotor exam? Yes, that is correct. Just like the AEMT exam, each candidate now at the paramedic level after January 1st of 2017 will have 2 full attempts. And a full attempt is you go when you take it the first time. If you have retest opportunities, you need to exhaust those retest opportunities. So currently now on the 12 skill, if you are successful, if you need to retest 5 or less skills, you're able to retest, and you're given 2 opportunities. So you have your first full attempt and then 2 retest opportunities that go together to make that first attempt. For the 6 skill, you're going to, as long as if you need to retest 3 or less skills after your first attempt, you will have 2 retest opportunities to be successful on those skills that you need to retest, and that'll constitute a full attempt. And you will have 2 full attempts just like you do at the AEMT level now. Yes, we do have the locations chosen already in the regions. As I did say, there are a couple that we're looking for. And if you send me an email or send Joanne Friel an email, and she can help you out with that. So if the packet we sent out a definition of team lead, you cannot find it now. If you look in the glossary at the end of the Appendix M, that has the definitions of everything, including what team member and team leader is. It's located back there. And as far as what is the motivations for students to continue with team leads in clinical time if they've had the 8 of 20 successes? Well, that's a program-specific thing. I mean, when I was learning as a paramedic, I wanted to get as much experience as possible. So my motivation was to see as many patients as possible and be successful with as many patients as possible. If your program, through your community of interest and your advisory board and your medical director decide that, hey, you hit that 18 out of 20, you're done, that's okay. Or if you want to continue on, and that's just the minimum you have to meet, and after that, there's so many different things to do in EMS that the more experience that they can gain in the field internship or the clinical setting, the better. But that's something that you have to look at with the resources that you have available. So that's an individualized program decision. But again, program director and the educators aren't making this decision along themselves. You need to involve your community of interest, and any changes like that, you would have to address with your advisory board and make sure you document in your minutes of why you did this. So the webinars that we've done here, they're available to anyone. You don't even need to log in to our website to get access to these webinars that we posted. So they're for anyone. They're for the students. Same thing with the portfolio material. That's out there for everybody. It's not locked down that only educators and instructors can get to. Anyone can get to that wants to look at this information. And yes, we do question about is it required to use our skill sheets, or can the program come up with their own? Program can do their own, make their own skill sheets as long as they track the 33 skills that we're looking for. They can track more, but they can't track that's a minimum. They have to have those 33. If you're using a form that gathers the same information on these 33 skills, and it works for you, and it works for your students, and it works for your community of interest, continue to use it. If you like to use ours, feel free to use ours, but we're not mandating that you have to use them. And question is, how long does the portfolio need to be kept? The portfolio, like everything else, is a part of the student's records, and students' records need to be maintained indefinitely. It's a permanent record, and these portfolio needs to be maintained as part of that permanent record. Will we need to submit the portfolio to the NREMT to sign off for a student to take the exam, or you just need to keep the record? And the answer to that is no, you will not need to submit the portfolios to us. But as the program director, just as you do now for the cognitive exam, you sign off, you sign an attestation that the student has met all the requirements of your program. For the portfolio, you're going to need to sign a similar attestation statement, and that states that your student has met all the requirements of the portfolio in order to take the psychomotor exam. So you're going to need to sign off that it's there. The attestation, there's a sample of the course completion attestation statement on our website in the portfolio section. It's fairly strongly worded. If we find people that are signing for students that have not completed a portfolio, we will be contacting the state, we will be contacting COA, and we'll take appropriate action. and those agencies will take appropriate action. We can't have people pencil whipping things. Now, there will be 2 points where a student can take their portfolio, or excuse me, take the psychomotor exam during phase 1. It'll either be at course completion when they have all the requirements done of the program, and that's the same point where they can take the cognitive exam. They've completed everything. Or as we do now, we will have a mechanism where the candidate has done all of the didactic and all of the laboratory portions of their education, as long as that is allowed by the state licensing authority, and also it is allowed by the program, and the program director signs an attestation to that effect, they'll be allowed to test at that point too. So they will have met all the requirements of the portfolio up until that point, and they'll be allowed to take their psychomotor exam, the new phase 1. But that'll be, it's similar, it's the same policy that we have now. We're just continuing that over to the new phase 1 exam. Aware of any programs that have public videos that they're willing to share regarding the 33 skills? I am not aware of any programs that do have that. And yes, Richmond, Kentucky, that's where Eastern Kentucky University is located, yes. I'm going to start teaching a paramedic class in January. When the students test out after January 1 of 17, am I correct in understanding the students will only have the option of testing the traditional 12 or the 5 stations I mentioned? No, after January 1 of 17, that anyone that starts their psychomotor exam after January 1 of 17 starts a full attempt, they will take the phase 1 6-skill psychomotor exam with the trauma, the 2 cardiac, the 2 orals, and the out-of-hospital scenario. Before that, they'll take the 12-skill. So a summative scenario exam is the same scenario as a formative one. The circumstances are the same, but the formative is where the student are stopped if mistakes are made, and the summative version, the instructor hands off and grades the attempt. So yeah, well, formative, yes, you can take the same scenario that you use for a summative can be used for a formative, and yes, you'll stop along the way. You also you have more flexibility too with a formative too. You could artificially start a formative scenario. Say I just want to test my students on the ability to start an IV, and I only have a 5-10 minute section of lab to do this. So I could have EMRs on the scene that have already done the blood pressure, that have already have a fairly complete patient assessment done that they can provide to the paramedic student that comes into the scenario. So we can kind of speed along a formative if we're looking to just look at a specific skill. But you don't want to do that with a summative. Summative, you want them to come in and start to finish care for a patient. But formative, sometimes to meet the needs of what you're looking at, you can speed that up and make that a little bit more artificial. But the summative, though, you want that to be a start to finish, and unless there's a safety error, you want to let that scenario play out for whatever the time frame is that you've allotted for that. That was my last one? Oh my gosh. Okay, that was the last question, and we are about a minute over here now. So I thank you for your time. If you have any other questions, please feel free to contact me at my email address there. Also, please look at the portfolio scenario link on our homepage. That will take you there. And okay, oh, I got one more coming up here. So, programmable mannequins. In our current exam, you're allowed to use high fidelity mannequins in the patient assessment trauma and the patient assessment medical. So it needs to be a high fidelity mannequin that can simulate actual patient behavior. And for the out of hospital scenario, we will allow that also, just as we do in the current trauma and the medical for the AEMT exams. So if you have any further questions, please feel free to contact me there or look at our website. And as we get new resources, we will be updating them there. We also will be posting the schedule as we formalize that schedule for the psychomotor exams. For the regional scenario development workshops. Look on our website and on NREMT's website. Once we have everything up and running for them, we have one scheduled in late January in Louisiana, and we have another one scheduled in the middle of February in Los Angeles. Once we have, NREMT has the registration mechanism up and running, look for the advertisement for that, and they'll start taking reservations for that. So thank you again for your time, and have a great day.